Hey guys, let's go on to part 2 of my interview with Garrett Daun, Radical Life Innovative Consultant and creator of Command Z Academy. In this installment, we get to learn about Garrett's journey and inspiration with learning the material, as well as how he came to his realizations about life, happiness, and fulfillment. Here we go. Let me ask you about your background. So, it sounds like you've done a lot of great experiential studying with Christopher Hyatt and everything, and I'd love to hear about how that journey went for you. And maybe we could start at the beginning. How did you get into all of this, and what inspired you to go along this path?
Yeah, I guess the force behind it kind of started when I was in high school or a little bit after, but I was more like into punk rock and anarchism and Earth First and all this kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed that. It was an adventurous time, so I don't regret any of it, but I see that there was a internal battle that was going on for a lot of my life, and then it had become externalized. So I thought it was about the government or the man or civilization or different institutions. And so I spent a lot of time, like maybe a few years, fighting against that kind of stuff. Which again, the force of that type of adventure is pretty amazing. I wouldn't discount it, but it was also kind of delusional, thinking that this battle was external. And I realized at some point I was thinking, like, what is the point of all this? Like, even if you win some of these battles against the government or the cops or whatever, it's kind of apt for right now. But even if you win some of these, you end up against someone with a monopoly on violence or that has overwhelming force, in the form of like nuclear weapons or a fully armed military or something. So I was like, this doesn't lead anywhere good, like, and if you extrapolate like winning those battles, wherever it leads to, it ends up still being some kind of ridiculous warfare, some kind. It's not. Right. It didn't make sense. And I'm saying I hit that wall in my mind. I was like, what am I actually trying to accomplish? Like, and then I also started to notice that almost all the days of my life were pretty peaceful, except when I would go get myself into stupid shit.
Okay.
So, like today, I'm sitting on the river, but say I was sitting on the Mississippi River when I was growing up in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I would be sitting there being miserable, thinking about these institutions that I needed to fight, but I wasn't there really present to like the actual daily peace and relaxation that was already present in my life. But I knew that this battle wasn't winnable. And so I really started to question everything. And I thought that I was just kind of making myself and other people miserable.
Like, what was the initial motivation that you thought that you needed to fight these battles, or was there?
I just thought there was injustice everywhere. Like everywhere I looked, I thought there was injustice. I think it started with like free speech and studying the ACLU and stuff, which they've kind of devolved lately. But yeah, studying those groups and their histories, and then I think I read the Unabomber's Manifesto, The Industrial Society and Its Future by Ted Kaczynski, which is a pretty amazing read, even now, still pretty relevant. But I had read that. And that's like a treatise kind of against technology and civilization. And it also deals with leftism in a very interesting way, psychology of modern leftism, which I also find pretty apt right now.
Okay.
But I had read that. I found it probably at the punk rock bookstore or whatever it was.
Right.
And so it turned me on to certain, hey, buddy, there's a dog here to see me. So it turned me on to certain ideas that I had never encountered before. But yeah, then so fast forward out of that, and I ended up getting into like the occult and mysticism and magic and meditation and philosophy. And I joined the Freemasons and the OTO in Oregon.
Wow.
And and that was a progression of events. I didn't seek out that group. I ended up meeting 7 different people that were members of that group from all different walks of life in the town I lived in. And I started thinking, is this some conspiracy to recruit me into this thing? It wasn't. Fun to think it was. But so I got into that whole world because I realized, there's this whole, like, what am I missing? And then I saw, this is what I'm missing. There's this whole other world, this hidden world of practices and experiences. And of course, like psychedelics probably contributed to that as well.
Wow.
Some psychedelic experiences that kind of cracked the shell of what was going on. One particular moment I remember looking down at a highway from a mountain, and there's this valley, and seeing all the lights of the cars going by, and I remembered feeling angry for a second, thinking, oh man, this would be so great if it wasn't for all these lights.
Mm.
And at some moment it occurred to me, I was like, wait, this is just a show for me. This is a beautiful show, and I'm shitting on it, like
Right.
looking at the sunset and getting upset. And, and so in that moment, I felt something really shift. I was like, actually, this is all a show for me. And
Wow.
it's extraordinary to be present for it, to even exist at all.
Right.
That didn't sink as deeply as it would later at that moment, but I think that was a seed that led to a lot of other things. And so,
And that was just a spontaneous moment that you had.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so all the seeking went on, and I joined those groups and had a lot of fun. But a lot of times it was reading rituals off of scripts and going to initiations that were kind of okay, but not like as potent or as profound as I kind of wanted them to be. Probably what I learned in there the most was just how to relate to men in a good way.
Right.
So it was more how to relate to people as an adult instead of on a lot of childish and emotional levels.
Okay.
And that's when I had read a lot of Hyatt's books, because he wrote a lot of books about different occult stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point I got the Undoing Yourself with Energized Meditation book. And in that book, there's actual physical exercises. The whole first introduction by Robert Anton Wilson, I think it's 26 pages of him basically browbeating you to actually do the exercises. He's saying, these are the best exercises I found. If you want to experience what you're dreaming about experiencing from reading my books, this is the stuff to do.
Oh,
Do
wow.
the exercises. And he just says this page after page with stories and metaphors and everything. Do it every single day. Do these exercises. Do these exercises. And you get to the opening chapters from Hyatt. He's also saying, do these exercises. Don't be one of the thousands of losers who actually just read this book and put it away. Do the exercise. That's what's most important.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, of course. So I did all the exercises like diligently for probably a year before I ever had what I call like a full lay down radical undoing session.
What would you suggest for someone, say someone wanted to just pick up this book and they're completely starting out, what would you suggest? How should they go through it? Should they just try their best to interpret what the instructions are and go through it?
It'd take a long time. I don't know. The book is great for introducing people to it, but it has a poor success rate in terms of, and that they admit that in the book itself. Hyatt and Wilson said that, because Wilson put up books of exercises as well.
Yeah.
And probably one in every 1,000 people maybe that I've met has done any of the exercises out of Robert Anton Wilson's books. And two of the books are just books full of exercises, Prometheus Rising and then Quantum Psychology.
Yeah.
And really, again, it tells you in the introduction, do these exercises. Don't just read the book. It's worthless if you do it that way.
Yeah.
And then and it has this amazing effect, because you read the chapters, and this goes for almost every bit of any kind of profound writing, or the poems of Walt Whitman, or anything you want to get yourself into.
Mm-hmm.
That has some kind of transcendence or enlightenment at its core, is that when you read the exercises, you think, your mind will say, oh, I understand what this is. I understand what he's getting at. In those particular books, when you do the exercises and then read the chapter again, it's like, oh man, how did I not see all of this? There's so much that I could never have known.
Yeah.
And then particularly with quantum psychology, it's like group. It's designed for group experiments, and you meet up each week, and there's 23 chapters. So each person will think, oh, I understand what this exercise is. And then it's designed, you end up bringing that to the table, and you suddenly witness, like, wow, each of these people thought a totally different thing about this exercise, whereas we think it's all just one set of instructions. So kind of what I'm getting at there is it's nearly impossible to do those exercises properly, but I did manage to get by for a while. I did them diligently, but I also had the benefit of Hyatt put out audio CDs, and there was DVDs, so you had a bunch more frames of reference to use. But really, it wasn't until I went and met him and went to his workshops and also was in a couple of the DVDs that then it suddenly hit me. I was like, it was like it catalyzed the 2 years that I'd been doing the undoing stuff on my own, because I had got myself in motion, meaning I had the outlines of what I was working on. When I went to meet him, it wasn't a wasted meeting. A lot of the people that were there, I think 2 out of 17 of us had done any of the exercises, and the other 15 went just because of his stature, because he was famous and they knew of him.
Okay.
And they kind of stood back. So he ended up sort of favoring me and one other guy Barry.
Because you could tell that you
Because
had done some background and you've actually tried the exercises and stuff like that.
yeah, and we had like intricate questions about specific exercises, whereas everyone else was like, "What are these exercises? You know, what are these going to be?" And so we got a lot of focus at that, which was amazing. And I think he knew at that time I wanted to be a trainer in it as well. So he smashed me down pretty hard on a lot of levels, but it was like it advanced my evolution 10 years in a single
Wow.
year, you know.
So what kind of stuff did you do?
Well, it's like you write these emails like you're writing to a teacher or a guru or something, and I thought I was all smart and I had all these long questions, ridiculous
Oh,
questions
okay.
looking back. And then
Yeah.
and then he destroys it with like a single sentence, you know, and then I'm sitting there
Just kind of
feeling
shows you
embarrassed.
that the question doesn't really matter, or
It's like when the Zen master, the question is irrelevant to any experience,
right.
but it was relevant, and that's why he tolerated it, because if you can ask the question and then be smashed down, it's just like when the Zen monks will go to the master and they tell him, "Oh, I had this big flowery meditation. There was a lotus flower with 1,000 petals. It was all bright red. What does it mean?" And the master always says, "Meikyo," and that just means it's delusion. Delusion, 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 delusion. Answer to every question, you know, while you're
Right.
on that
Right.
path. And then you have to go, fuck, how did I get lost in that again? And so that kind of smackdown intellectually, psychologically, and even physically on some level with the exercises, they're just smashing apart the tension patterns in your body. So long story short, I went through that a lot in a short amount of time. But in the end, when I found the undoing stuff, and I was doing that while this seeking was going on, but I was just doing some basics. And I don't think I even noticed that it was working on any level. I just noticed looking back that I started becoming capable of doing a lot more stuff with my life. And the things that I used to just dream about doing, I was actually doing. So I ended up
Wow.
doing mountaineering, doing rock climbing, riding a lot of physical activity, doing martial arts at that time, like 8 or 9 hours a week,
Wow.
Jiu-Jitsu
Nice.
and doing these organizing meetings with people to work on this type of stuff. Like that just happened. I didn't even try to make that happen. That happened by unleashing the tension that was locked up in all the chronic tension that was locked up in my muscles. That sort of armors us from life and defends us from life, from when you have traumatic or whatever experiences as a kid. Your only response that you can have, since you can't really leave your parents, is to tense up against it. So we learn and from mimicking them and just from our own body to tense up against life, and that becomes chronic. And in a way, one chiropractor I knew for a while called it living rigor. Like when the body muscle is dead, it gets rigor mortis and it becomes firm, it becomes rigid. And he said that some muscles, if you're just sitting like this all day, then some of these muscles will become rigid, and he called it living rigor. Wilhelm Reich called it armoring. Which also indicates that it's defending yourself against life.
Right.
When you get older, you don't need to defend yourself against life. You need to let it all come in. But there's no way to do that intellectually. You have to break apart that actual armor, that physical tension. And so what the undoing work does is breaks apart and destroys all those chronic tensions progressively over time and cumulatively over time.
Wow.
So you stop doing all this extra work to stay worried and to stay tense, which you're not even aware that you're doing. Some people I've met have the shoulders like this all the time. That's calories burning. That's a work effort that's taking away from other things you could be doing with your life throughout every single day. So you're running at 40% capacity because that other 60% is devoted to tensing up the body.
To keeping yourself, I guess, trying to guard yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of the sense where people they walk around, they have a dramatic event, they don't know how to deal with it, so they just tense their muscles in a way of like trying to shield themselves or armor themselves to it because they think it might happen again or get worried about it. So,
and the issue there is then life is going to smash you down like the waves I talked about earlier, because most situations aren't very bad, and even the catastrophes we imagine are going to happen in these worst case scenarios in our minds almost never actually happen.
Yeah.
And then when they do happen, they're not even as bad as they seem in your mind. They're always more worse in the mind than in reality.
Right.
I can't say if it's the same. I haven't had my legs or arms cut off or something to say, in that case, but I've talked to people who have, and even then they pick it up and roll with it anyway. So
stories you hear all the time about people that have gone into like seriously traumatic events, and they're able to pick up from it and use it as a way of like spinning it positively and being able to actually grow from it. And that's the other thing that you're saying, that I see that all the time with people, is that they're always, they're always guarded, like try to have like even base level conversations with people sometimes. And they won't even really be able to talk to you in an authentic way because they're so guarded about, how they're going to be looking. Even stuff as simple as being judged in a social group. It causes people to be so tense in their actions and so rigid in what they're trying to do, that it just destroys, like I would say, all of their kind of their growth, their maybe fulfillment from experiences, pretty much everything that would make life worth living, in the way that I understand it. All right, so in part 3, we get to learn about Garrett's 3-step philosophy for how to transcend negativity and suffering. Stay tuned and stay strong.